Hello and welcome to World News Program. I'm your host, Karim Zachary, and these are the headlines. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ramtal Amamra, pleaded Friday in Bamako for concrete measures with the aim of leading the process of full implementation in the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali. Mr. Stéphane de Mistura, the UN Secretary General's personal envoy for Western Sahara, is on a visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps and met with Polisario Front leaders as part of the UN envoy series of visits to the region. Hundreds of Russians gathered in Moscow's famed Hall of Columns to bid farewell to the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. Also in the program, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Sri Lanka's former president who fled abroad after mass protests in July, has returned to the country. Also coming up, thousands of people marched Friday in Argentina to denounce the attack that targeted Vice President Cristina Fernandez. First in our topical news, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ramtal Amamra, pleaded Friday in Bamako for concrete measures with the aim of leading the process of full implementation of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali from the Algiers process to its successful conclusion. Mariam Zian reports.
The Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ramtal Amamra, has been in Bamako for 3 days. He was received on Friday by the highest Malian authorities as part of his work and friendship visit to Mali. The Algerian head of diplomacy participated in the monitoring committee of the 2015 peace agreement that was brokered by the Algerian government, aiming to create just and lasting peace in Mali. During the meeting, he also took the opportunity to brief the Malian interim president on the results of the 18th session of the bilateral strategic committee that was held the day before.
The same quality, the same warmth, the same climate of mutual trust and solidarity marked our talks yesterday in the framework of the bilateral strategic committee that we chaired, my brother Abdullah and myself. In the same way, this spirit was extended today by the meeting with the acting Prime Minister of Territorial Administration, as well as with the President of the National Transitional Council.
On Thursday, he met with his Malian counterpart Abdoulaye Diop during the aforementioned.
I think I can say that today's session has brought much to our common reflection and our desire to advance our partnership and cooperation actions through increased dynamism and a more sustained commitment, and also through a call for and structure created by our country in order to precede a sustained development, an ambitious development of the partnership between our two countries, which have all interest in working hand in hand.
The meetings led to fruitful and in-depth talks on strengthening bilateral partnership in various areas, as well as on prospects for joint action to address peace, security and development challenges collectively. It's worth noting that Algeria has been playing a major role in bringing peace to Mali and stability to the region, and the UN Security Council recognized and praised its pivotal role in assisting Malian parties in implementing the 2015 peace agreement.
And for a further analysis on the matter, All24 News contacted Mr. Sohaib Hajjab, an e-journalist and African affairs specialist. We asked him about the ability of the agreement for peace and reconciliation in Mali resulting from Algiers' process to contribute to promote peace and stability in Mali. Let's follow.
Much for this question. Following the Algerian agreements, Algeria always play a key role to keep peace in the world, in many places around the world, especially in the conflict zone. When we talk about Mali crisis, it's an unstable place, so there is a lot of terrorism movements based there. these movements cannot allow the Malian people to live in peace and to develop their economy and especially the political point. I believe that the Algerian agreements play a good role to participate to find a solution for the Mali crisis, especially Algeria in the history has many successful achievements in the political conflict solution. Especially if we talk about examples like between Ethiopia and Eritrea, it's big conflict. So I think the Algerian diplomacy, the Algerian soldiers know very well how to find a solution and how to understand these African conflicts based on Mali.
To Algerian military cooperation now, Algeria, along with Russia, China, and India, participate in the Vostok 2022 Strategic Command and Staff Exercise in Russian territory. The military exercise, which was launched Thursday under the supervision of the Russian Deputy Defense Minister, will continue until the 7th of this month. A statement by the Algerian Ministry of Defense said that the participation of a combat unit of the ground forces in this exercise allows improving skills and performing joint tasks, as well as exchanging and sharing experiences with the participation of foreign armies. To Western Sahara issue now, the Staffan de Mistura, the UN Secretary General's personal envoy for Western Sahara, planned a visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps on Friday to meet with Polisario Front leaders as part of UN envoy series of visits to the region. Staffan de Mistura made this first visit to the area in January after being appointed to the role in October, while the Polisario Front reiterated its support for a political resolution based on self-determination vote. Officials from Sahrawi underlined their dedication to complete national independence, highlighting the referendum as a workable middle ground. And earlier, we spoke to the representative of Polisario Front in the UN, Sidi Mohammed Amar, who is at the refugee camps, and he said that the meeting was an opportunity to confirm the Sahrawi and Polisario Front stance over the willingness to reach a common ground with the United Nations framework.
السيد ستيفن دي مستورة المبعوث الشخصي للأمين العام للصحراء الغربية حل نهار اليوم.
As you know, Mr. Stephen de Mistura, the special envoy of the United Nations in Western Sahara, arrived today for a second visit to meet the Sahrawi officials. In his first stop, he held a preliminary meeting with the Sahrawi negotiating delegation, and this meeting was an opportunity to confirm the Sahrawi and Polisario Front stance over the willingness to reach a common ground with the United Nations framework and with the legal framework that outlined the Western Sahara cause as self-determination, as well as the necessity to fully respect the Sahrawi absolute right of self-determination and independence that cannot be negotiated.
والاستقلال.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced the appointment of Abdoulaye Bathily of Senegal as his special representative and head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, the country that has witnessed fierce clashes between opposing armed groups amid calls from UN Security Council to end the violence. Islam said.
The UN Security Council has called on all parties in Libya to preserve the prevailing calm on the ground and to refrain from violence or other actions that could escalate tensions. The Council members urged the parties to reach an agreement on a plan to uphold presidential and parliamentary elections that could unify the government after years of disputes. The Council had also denounced the bloody clashes carried out by the armed groups in Tripoli lately, reiterating the fact that there can be no military solution to the conflict there. On the same context, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has appointed Senegalese diplomat Abdoulaye Bathily as his special envoy in Libya. Despite the Government of National Unity hesitations in Tripoli, diplomatic sources said the UN Security Council members had agreed on Bathily's appointment as UN Special Envoy in Libya. The Senegalese former government minister succeeds John Kubis, who resigned from the position earlier this year after diplomatic efforts to end Libya's conflict.
Thousands of Iraqis have taken to the streets of the capital Baghdad days after deadly clashes between rival Shiite groups raised fears of widespread unrest. Let's follow.
Waving Iraqi flags and shouting slogans reminiscent of Arab Springs, several hundreds of people took to the streets of Baghdad to protest against the regime and its corruption, demanding its downfall and the end of Iranian meddling in Iraq.
We refuse them. The people refuse them. No coordination framework and no to the whole government, for the formation of a new government, for the dissolution of the parliament, and for new true Iraqi faces, for true change.
The demonstration was organized by the movement known as Those of October, in reference to the activists and ordinary people who in that month of 2019 peacefully took to the streets of Baghdad and other cities in the country for several consecutive weeks, demanding reforms of the political system.
This protest today is to refuse that the coordination framework forms any government. For the future of Iraq, we defined several main demands, including the fall of the political system and the political parties that are governing Iraq since 2003 and until today.
Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi responded saying that he will vacate his post if the complicated political situation in the country continues.
And I warn that from now on, if they want to continue to stir up chaos, conflict, discord and strife, and not listen to the voice of reason, I will take my moral and patriotic steps by announcing the vacancy of the position at the appropriate time, according to Article 81 of the Iraqi Constitution, and hold them accountable before the Iraqis and before history.
Despite Iraq's oil wealth, many citizens suffer from poverty and unemployment. The country is also affected by power outage and deteriorating public services and is now facing water shortage and drought.
Moving on now, the Palestinian Asir Club announced the death of a detainee, Musa Haran Abu Mohammed, 40-year-old, on Saturday morning at Asaf Harvey Hospital, as a result of the medical negligence policy pursued by the Occupation Prisons Administration against sick detainees. The statement said that Abu Mohammed was arrested after entering to work in occupied Jerusalem without a permit. According to his family, he was suffering from neurological problems. Around 4,550 Palestinian prisoners are detainees in Israeli prisons, including 27 women, 175 minors, with no trial nor any charge against them. 7 people were killed and 23 injured as tribal violence flared in Sudan's southern Blue Nile state. The State Security Committee reported just weeks after major clashes, but the cause of the latest violence is not known yet. In mid-July, at least 105 people were killed and thousands were displaced in fighting over land between the Hausa and Funch tribes, and unrest spread to other states. Hundreds of Russians gathered in Moscow's famed Hall of Columns to bid farewell to the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. The 91-year-old Gorbachev received a public send-off, with the Muscovites able to observe his coffin in the Hall of Columns, which is visible from the Kremlin and where former Soviet leaders have been honored. Gorbachev will be laid to rest in Novodevichy Cemetery in Moscow, on a graveyard site next to his wife. Still with the same topic, Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the former Soviet Union, passed away at the age of 91. News agencies reported that he died after a long illness. Maryam Zian.
Born in 1931, Mikhail Gorbachev passed away aged 91 in a hospital in Moscow. The former Soviet leader, who completed his law degree from Moscow State University in 1955, became the General Secretary of the Soviet Union Communist Party in 1985. Internationally, he reached arms control deals with the US, refused to intervene when Eastern European nations rose up against their communist rulers, and ended the Soviet war in Afghanistan that had raged since 1979. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990 for the leading role he played in the radical changes in East-West relations. He was given the credit for removing the curtain that divided Europe since the World War II and for the reunification of Germany.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, If you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In 1990, he became president of the Soviet Union until the country's dissolution in 1991.
Мы ушли от старого мира.
We need more enterprise, more democracy, more organization and discipline. Then we will be able to bring perestroika up to the full speed and give new impetus to developing socialism.
However, in modern Russia, he has been on the fringes of politics, focusing on educational and humanitarian projects. Considered one of the key figures of the end of the 20th century, Gorbachev will remain in history as one who contributed, despite himself, to the fall of the communist regimes in Eastern Europe and the breakup of the Soviet Union. Following the announcement of his death on August 30th, tributes have been paid worldwide to him. Vladimir Putin has expressed his deepest condolences and said Gorbachev has had a huge impact on the course of history and found his own solutions to urgent problems. Likewise, Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, Boris Johnson, Frank-Walter Steinmeier and many others described him as a rare leader and paid tributes to him. Gorbachev will be buried next to his wife in Moscow, a city where many prominent Russians rest in peace.
To Sri Lanka now. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Sri Lanka's former president, who fled abroad after mass protests in July, has returned to the country. The former leader landed in the capital, Colombo, on a Singapore Airlines flight from Thailand in the early hours of Saturday. His return represents a sensitive matter for the new government, which does not want renewed protest and will need to ensure security. The US approved a $1.1 billion armed deal for Taiwan on Friday, promising to continue reinforcing the island's defenses as tensions with China rise. The letter declared that this action would severely jeopardize relations between Washington and Beijing, which warned of countermeasures. The deal comes a month after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a challenging visit to Taiwan, prompting mainland China to start a military operation around the Taiwanese island. Thousands of people marched on Friday in Argentina to denounce the attack that targeted Vice President Cristina Fernandez. Groups of social and human rights organizations, unions, students, and militants' families began to arrive early in the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires to show solidarity with the former president and defend democracy.
Thank God the bullet did not fire. If not, we would be talking about something different. We'd be talking about Cristina Fernandez being murdered. The truth is that this is not only unforgivable, but we cannot allow it.
To impose a price cap on Russian oil in an attempt to stem the flow of funds into the Kremlin's war coffers, but keep crude flowing to avoid price rises. Let's follow this report with Nabil Khazini.
In a dramatic escalation of the energy battle between Russia and the West, G7 countries intended a new blow to Moscow's energy windfall and decided on Friday to urgently cap the price of Russian oil.
Russia benefits economically from the uncertainties associated with the war in the energy markets. Russia is currently making high profits from the export of raw materials, such as oil, and we want to resolutely oppose this.
The attempt to stem the flow of funds into the Kremlin's coffers seems to be a mechanism complex to be put on place. Within few hours, Moscow hit back, announced an indefinite shutdown of its vital Nord Stream gas pipeline to Germany, citing malfunctions on a key turbine along the pipeline. But for the German manufacturer Siemens Energy, an oil leak alone cannot justify, from a technical point of view, the halt of the gas pipeline. European officials said Russia was cutting back its gas deliveries to punish Europe for its opposition to the war in Ukraine. Moscow denies using energy supplies as an economic weapon in retaliation for Western sanctions. The tit-for-tat move comes amid growing fears that households in the EU will not be able to afford the cost of heating the coming winter, with governments under pressure to alleviate the pain of the resulting high inflation. Despite the United States saying priority in its energy exports will be for Europe, the old continent remains highly dependent on Russian energy, and an escalation in hostilities could exacerbate the economic crisis already facing the Western allies.
And earlier today in our special coverage, we talked to Dr. Hamoud Salhi, an Associate Dean Professor in California University, about the energy crisis that Europe is facing. Let's listen.
You have, on the one hand, an immediate cause, which is the war in Ukraine. That has changed all the equations, all the planning before. Prior to the Ukraine crisis, the Europeans and the American priority was the green energy. Their plan was to move ahead with implementing new rules and new regulation that would make the planet safer. There were, of course, several problems. The lobbyists against such move, also private interests of companies were also biggest challenge to this. The Ukrainian crisis changed that. It reversed that role by giving now more emphasis to resolving the crisis of gas supplies and using gas as weapon to undermine Russia, what the Europeans see as a threat, and the United States. Those are the immediate cause, but deep inside there are seriously some major problems, and those major problems at what are driving this crisis more than anything else. We are on the verge of a major economic crisis, because when you look at, for example, the strategies that are adopted for climate change, for renewable energy, they were all limited and centered around states' own initiatives, meaning that the United Nations, the climate rounds that we've seen in Paris or Kyoto, all of those were left, the implementation of those decisions were voluntary and allowed the state to do what they perceive as their best interest. That national interest is another root causes for this. The second thing, on the European level, for example, you have different political positions, and most of the political positions on renewable energy, again, centered or are driven by national interests more than anything else. The lack of solidarity among the globe in general, whether in the United States or in the United Nations, all of this made this crisis more and more dangerous.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Saturday that Turkey can play a role of mediator around the Ukrainian nuclear plant in Zaporizhia. In recent weeks, fears have grown in Europe regarding the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant controlled by Russian troops since the beginning of March. The uncrewed Artemis mission is ready for another launch attempt this weekend after technical issues halted its first launch attempt. The Space Launch System rocket on Orion spacecraft are scheduled to lift off between 2:17 and 4:17 p.m. Saturday from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Although there is no crew aboard, the mission is the first step of the Artemis program, which aims to return humans to the moon and eventually land them on Mars.
Yesterday at 14:17 local time, we reset the clock to T-minus 45 hours and counting, and so far they're proceeding right on schedule. Last night, after the briefing, we powered up Orion, we performed all the RF testing, we also powered up the core stage, all looked nominal.
That's all we have for now. A reminder of our top stories. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Rumtala Mamra, pleaded on Friday in Bamako for concrete measures with the aim of leading the process of full implementation of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali. And Stefan de Mistura, the UN Secretary General's personal envoy for Western Sahara, is on a visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps and met with Polisario Front leaders as part of the UN envoy series of visits to the region. Hundreds of Russians gathered in Moscow's famed Hall of Columns to bid farewell to the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Sri Lanka's former president who fled abroad after mass protests in July, has returned to the country. And finally, thousands of people marched on Friday in Argentina to denounce the attack that targeted Vice President Cristina Fernandez. Well, that's it for today's World News. For more news, you can follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for watching, and take care.